sky was painted in hues of purple and gold as dusk settled over the old Henderson farm. Chickens scratched through the straw, and somewhere in the distance, a cow mooed languidly. It was a peaceful evening, but the biting chill in the air hinted at the winter to come. Little did everyone know, trouble was brewing on the horizon. Just as the last rays of sunlight dipped beneath the fields, a black truck rolled down the narrow dirt driveway, muffled engine growling like a hungry wolf. Inside, 4 masked figures bristled with grim determination. They had plans that included taking everything from the Hendersons, not just the valuables, but the very essence of what the farm represented: a legacy built on sweat, toil, and hope. The headlights cut through the dusk as they parked hastily. Shadows danced over the walls of the barn, flickering shapes that mirrored the chaos brewing within their minds. They climbed out, their movements furtive yet methodical, each of them ready to strip this family of their peace in a matter of minutes. While the wind whispered through the cracked barn door, a sudden crack of thunder echoed through the sky. The threat of the storm loomed, a perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. In the far corner of the barn, old Mr. Henderson wiped his hands on an oily rag, a surprising warmth in his heart despite the chill of the night. At 72, he was more than just a farmer. He was the sentinel of this land, having watched over it for decades. Hearing the rattle of chains, he squinted at the figures advancing toward him, their intentions hidden under layers of darkness. But Mr. Henderson wasn't just another old man waiting for trouble. He was the embodiment of resilience. As the masked thieves advanced, their confidence radiating like a hot flame, he became a kindling wood that refused to crumble. How often does one find themselves at the crossroads of fear and bravery? In that moment, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He could see a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes, masked or not. Maybe they expected an easy target, a frightened old man ready to comply. But they had underestimated not just Mr. Henderson but the heart of the family that had fought to keep this farm alive. He called out, voice steady yet commanding. The leader of the group, a tall figure with a jagged scar across his cheek, sneered and stepped forward. "What do you think you can do, old man?" The tension slithered closer, a thick mist of anticipation building like clashing storm clouds. From behind him, Mr. Henderson heard the creaking of the barn door. Laura, his granddaughter, emerged, a courageous spirit with a heart of gold. At just 16, she understood the weight of what they were facing. She'd grown up roaming the fields, understanding every corner of the farm as if it were a loving map etched into her soul. "Grandpa, we need to call the police," she urged, not realizing her voice trembled with both fear and fierce determination. "Not yet, Laura," he replied, an ironclad calm enveloping his words. The masked men exchanged glances, their bravado faltering for the slightest moment. They hadn't expected resistance, especially not from a feisty girl and her tenacious grandfather. Laura's crystal blue eyes blazed with defiance, a striking glare that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. The leader barked, waving his flashlight like an authoritarian gavel. "You think you can protect this place? It's just dirt and hay." But to them, it represented everything: legacy, family, strength. The air felt heavy with anticipation, a charged atmosphere thickening like the storm cloud outside, and resilience sparked in Mr. Henderson's heart. "Everything you see, it's not just dirt and hay. It's the blood, sweat, and tears of my family." His voice dipped low, daring them to challenge his courage. As the fog of intimidation began to clear, the thieves couldn't quite hide their nervousness behind their masks. Their bravado was peppered with hesitation. Would these two stand their ground? Would they be willing to fight for what mattered? Then, just as the leader was about to lash out, a low growl interrupted the tension. The Rhodesian Ridgeback Duke broke free from the confines of the farmhouse, his instincts kicking in. He charged toward the intruders, teeth bared, a protector born from generations of working alongside this family. In that moment, the dynamics shifted. The thieves had come with the intent to intimidate, but now they were faced with an unexpected alliance of man and beast, 2 generations of Hendersons united in their unwavering stand. Underestimating Duke was a grave mistake, and in a split second, the masked men turned to flee, scrambling back to their truck, tripping over each other as panic surged through them. Mr. Henderson shouted, both proud and protective. The defiance coursing through him ignited Laura's spirit. She raced to the barn, an ancient, rusty pitchfork clutched in her hands, a makeshift tool of resistance, a simple symbol of what courage could look like even in the bleakest moments. But perhaps it was never about the weapon. It was simply the fire within that pushed her forward. With one swift motion, she thrust the pitchfork into the dirt, an act that marked her ground, a line drawn in a world that always seemed ready to take. Her message was clear. Here on this land, they wouldn't just give up and roll over. The thieves stumbled backward, realizing the fight ahead wasn't just about their greed. It was a fight against a legacy. The farm wasn't just land, it was a home. Every blade of grass whispered stories of strength and survival. And in that moment, they felt not just fear, but an overwhelming sense of vulnerability infused with that unexpected courage displayed by the old man and his brave granddaughter. In the shadows of the barn, the wind picked up, rustling through the worn wooden beams as if urging them to push forward. They didn't come here for a fight. They came for an easy target, Mr. Henderson reminded Laura, who stood firm, the pitchfork now resting at her side, a silent vow against the darkness. Just then, the leader hesitated, glancing back at his crew who were already cowering in the truck. For a fleeting moment, he considered retreat, realization dawning on him. The Hendersons would not be made victims tonight. He shouted, the defiance they once had crumbling under the steadfast resolve of 2 against 4. They clambered into the truck, fumbling, the ever-looming shadows of Duke barking and lunging behind them. The engine roared to life, but heavy boots weighed down with shame refused to lead them back to safety. As the truck barreled down the gravel drive, disappearing into the distance, the night air fell still. Slowly, breath returned to the old barn like the gentle silence after a storm. The sky began to clear, revealing 100 stars sprinkled across the expanse, twinkling as if applauding the victories earned through grit and courage. "You did good, Grandpa," Laura said, her voice brimming with newfound strength. Mr. Henderson turned to her, his heart swelling with pride. "No, we did good." Later, as they took a moment to breathe, they shared stories about the farm, their legacy, the struggles and the victories. Because they had faced fear together, they had grasped something deeper through the tension of that encounter. They understood the power of standing unwavering, even when odds seemed stacked against you. Their defiance painted over the shadows left by fear, reminding them that home is always worth fighting for, a lesson ingrained in the very soil beneath their feet. And in the soft glow of the barn, as they tended to their duties, Mr. Henderson knew he had passed a crucial torch to Laura that night. A flame of bravery, resilience, and a spirit that would continue to flourish on this land they loved so deeply. The farm remained untouched, its legacy unwavering, a testament not just to struggle but defiance against those who would dare come for something they could never truly steal. The wind howled through the trees, a chilling whisper that carried an ominous feeling. On a secluded plot of land stood the Thompson farm, a patchwork of crops and old wooden barns shimmering in the moonlight. The air was still, the silence cloaked in an uneasy calm, but under that calm, a storm was brewing, one that would test the very fabric of this tight-knit family's resolve. Inside the farmhouse, Sarah Thompson wearily closed the door to her kitchen. It had been a long day. The last of the harvest had been gathered and stacked neatly in the barn. Her husband Tom was outside checking the animals, while their 2 children, Mia and Jake, were watching TV, blissfully unaware of the shadows creeping in from the outside world. As Sarah flicked off the lights, she felt the unfamiliar aura of dread. Her gut twisted, whispering warnings she couldn't pinpoint. The sense of something amiss hung in the air, palpable yet elusive. Something was about to shatter the tranquility. Just as she settled into her chair, there came a knock at the door, solid and demanding. Startled, she glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. Who would be knocking at this hour? Swallowing her unease, she approached the door. As she peered through the peephole, 3 dark figures stood silhouetted against the moonlit night, faces obscured by masks. Heart racing, Sarah stepped back, adrenaline flooding her system. She turned to call for Tom, but the sound was lost when the door burst open with a violent swing, slamming against the wall. The masked intruders stormed in, their presence a thundercloud threatening to unleash chaos. "Stay where you are." The tallest one growled, a glint of metal flashing in his hand. Panic surged inside Sarah as she clutched her chest, mind racing for a plan. Inside, another voice stirred, the fighter in her, who had handled cattle, weathered storms, and nurtured her family through hardships. Tom, hearing the commotion, rushed inside, primeval instinct kicking in. He froze at the sight of the intruders, a fierce protector emerging from the shadows of fear. "Just do what we say and no one gets hurt," the leader barked, eyes darting between Sarah and Tom. But the Thompson family was not one to bow easily. "You picked the wrong house," Tom said, voice steady, firm. There was a challenge in his eyes, the kind of resolve that only comes from years of wrestling with the land, battling against nature's fury. Sarah shouted, her voice slicing through the tension. She could see their confusion in the dim light, but she needed them out of harm's way. The kids hesitated, eyes wide, sensing the storm brewing, but they obeyed. Tom demanded, stepping closer, refusing to let fear dictate their fate. The intruder with the weapon sneered, "We're here for the valuables, old man." A surge of fury bubbled inside Sarah, the thrumming of her heart turning into a rallying call. She couldn't let them see her fear. "You think you can just walk in here and take what's ours? This farm isn't just property, it's our home." The leader felt the weight of her words, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He'd likely expected an easy mark, not this fierce defiance. Behind that bravado, something snapped. Suddenly, moving with calculated precision, he lunged forward and grabbed Tom by the collar, dragging him toward the kitchen. In that split second, time seemed to freeze. The chaos around them slipped into slow motion. Sarah's mind raced, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Her gaze fell on the wooden spoon resting on the countertop. A simple cooking tool, it now became a potential weapon. She shrieked, grabbing the spoon and charging forward. The intruder barely had time to react. She swung it with all her strength, the cracking sound echoing through the kitchen as it struck his wrist. The man released Tom, howling in surprise and pain. Tom, seizing the moment, shoved the intruder back, adrenaline surging. He took a step forward, grounded and resolute, a living embodiment of defiance. The other two masked men exchanged frantic glances. A blend of shock and hesitation filled the room like a palpable force. They hadn't come to face a family willing to fight back. But fear also fought against their greed, and indecision hung like a shadow between them. In the background, Sarah could hear Jake's muffled whimpers from the hallway. Her heart ached. She needed to protect him, protect all of them. With newfound determination, Tom turned to Sarah, eyes alive with fire. "Stay close to the kids. If anything happens, get them out." As the first intruder made his move, lunging for Tom again, Sarah rushed to grab a skillet from the stove. It was heavy, but she felt the weight of resilience behind it. She swung, connecting with a resounding clang that rang through the air, sending the intruder stumbling. He screamed, realizing that their plan was derailing. Slowly, the tides were changing. The three thieves, once brimming with confidence, were now trapped by their poor choices. They may have entered the Thompson household with intimidation, but faced with sheer determination, doubt crept in like a small crack on a glass surface. "Get out," Tom chanted, his voice powerful, echoing in the small kitchen. The force of his words pushed against the trespassers, unraveling their bravado. One of the masked men hesitated, jaw clenched in fury, then bolted for the back door, an escape route overshadowed by the sudden realization they wouldn't leave empty-handed tonight. It was a game of survival now, and they weren't ready to face a family prepared to defend what was theirs. Tom shouted, igniting a fire in Sarah's chest. She rushed for the door, keeping an unyielding grip on the skillet. The leader stumbled back, eyes wide and glassy with fear. He hadn't planned for this resistance. Moments turned into an eternity as the confrontation escalated. In the chaos, Sarah caught a glimpse of Mia creeping down the hallway, curiosity overriding her understanding of danger. Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the night. "Mia!" Tom barked, determination igniting fire in his eyes. The urgency snapped Mia into action, scrambling back toward the safety of the shadows. And just like that, the tension was palpable, each heartbeat a reminder of what was at stake. The remaining intruders, caught in the crossfire of fear and desperation, began to back away, inching toward the door as if the very air were coiling around them, keeping them hostage. "Don't you dare come near my family again," Tom yelled, pushing forward. The words echoed through the once quiet farmhouse, rattling the very foundation of their resolve. With that, one of the intruders, the youngest of the three, barely more than a boy, stumbled. The earlier bravado had melted away, leaving only fear. He looked over his shoulder, weighing his options. The door was right there, but so was the courage of the Thompsons, unwavering and impenetrable. The leader hesitated for just a heartbeat, tension hanging thick in the air. Then, as if a dam had burst, they turned on their heels, retreating in hurried steps, slamming through the back door and sprinting into the night. The night air felt impossibly heavy and hollow as their presence faded, leaving behind a vacuum filled with adrenaline and disbelief. The farmhouse stood silent again, but the echoes of courage lingered, resonating through the very walls. Breath-tight and faces pale, Tom and Sarah turned to find Mia and Jake cautiously peering from the doorway. They rushed into their parents' arms, relieved but shaken. Mia asked, eyes wide, full of disbelief, clinging to her brother as though they were anchoring to a lifeline. "We faced them together," Sarah murmured, heart swelling with pride. In that moment, they were more than just a family. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the moonlight filtered through the windows, the Thompson family united in their embrace, reminding themselves of the love that fortified their home, the power that contrasted the night's chaos. They realized that nothing could strip them of their grit, and together they could weather any storm that dared to challenge their roots. With the dawn on the horizon, light slowly washed over the farm, chasing away the shadows. The world felt different now. The intruders had come and gone, leaving only the will of a family standing tall against the threat. And though they had faced fear, they emerged stronger, united, and unyielding, a testament to what it truly means to fight for your home. In the heart of the Thompson farm, where resilience and hope intertwine, stories of courage would echo for generations, lived through every sunrise that painted the fields golden. And no matter what darkness lay ahead, the Thompson family knew they would always stand together to keep their legacy alive. The silence of the countryside was shattered by the distant growl of an engine. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the Thompson farm, an ominous figure emerged, a black pickup truck creeping down the dirt road, tires kicking up dust as it approached. Inside that truck, three masked shadows huddled together, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. "Tonight, we take what's ours," the driver whispered, fueled by stories of easy pickings that floated through dark alleys. They had targeted this family farm, convinced it would be an easy score. After all, how much trouble could a few farmers pose? As the vehicle rolled to a stop, the two men in the back exchanged glances, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They had convinced themselves that speed and surprise would be their allies. The farmhouse stood silent, unaware of the brewing storm, lit only by the soft glow of the kitchen window. Inside, Sarah Thompson dried dishes alongside her husband, John. The cheerful clinking of cutlery painted a picture of comfort, the warm atmosphere filled with the aroma of baked bread and roasted vegetables. Mia and Jake, their two kids, lounged on the couch, engaged in a world of cartoons, happily oblivious to the ominous figures lurking in the shadows. Without warning, the peace shattered as the front door swung open with a powerful kick, sending it crashing against the wall. Startled, Sarah fell back against the counter, heart racing as panic sliced through the kitchen's warmth. "Get down," the driver shouted, his voice gravelly and harsh. The masked men surged in with menacing confidence, but a flicker of uncertainty danced behind their masks as they examined their surroundings. This was no abandoned shack. The Thompson family farm was a place built on hard work, sweat, and love. It was where lives had been forged in struggle, and that legacy would not be so easily dismantled. John shouted, instinctively stepping in front of Sarah and the kids. Mia and Jake's eyes were wide with fear, yet they remained frozen, instinctively understanding the gravity of the situation but too bewildered to move. "Just hand over the cash," the leader sneered, brandishing a knife that gleamed ominously under the kitchen light. Like hell you will, John replied, voice steeled with defiance. There was no backing down here. His family was at stake. With every year he spent cultivating this land, he'd fought hardships more ferocious than these men could imagine. The tension hung thick in the air, nearly suffocating. Fear coiled around Sarah, but deep within her, a fire ignited. Could fear overpower the love that fueled her family? No. Their lives were intertwined with this land, and they had the power to protect it. She yelled, taking a step forward, her heart pounding. The masked men hesitated, caught off guard by the unfamiliar resolve emanating from this seemingly vulnerable woman. They had expected a scared family, not one prepared to stand tall in the face of danger. The leader spat, frustration bleeding into anger. The man lunged forward, aiming the knife at John, who quickly sidestepped and caught the intruder off guard, grabbing his wrist in a struggling attempt to wrestle the blade from his grip. As the two men grappled, Sarah spotted a heavy cast-iron skillet resting on the countertop. Without thinking, she lunged for it, and in a swift, decisive motion, swung it hard at the leader's back, the metal crashing with a sound that resonated through the kitchen like a thunderous clap. "Get out," she shouted, both terrified and invigorated by the unexpected surge of bravery within her. The intruder teetered forward, momentarily stunned. John seized the advantage, pushing his attacker away and sending him stumbling across the room. The two remaining masked men stared wide-eyed, witnessing a scene they had not considered. The Thompson family was fighting back. Jake's voice trembled as he clung to Mia, who had finally broken from her paralysis. "Run to the neighbor's house," Sarah commanded, her voice sharp but filled with love. Without hesitating, the children bolted to the back door, where the dogs, sensing the commotion, began barking loudly. Their protective nature stirred, and the sound of their barking seemed to embolden Sarah and John as they faced down the thieves. The leader barked, realizing their grip on the situation was slipping. Fear had begun to wane into desperation, yet John and Sarah stood fast, faces lined with determination. "No one is getting hurt here tonight if you leave right now," John declared, eyes narrowing, making it clear he would defend his family with everything he had. The tension in the room morphed into a palpable energy, and even the masked men could feel it. In psychology, fear often paralyses. They had expected an easy target, not this fierce spirit that stood before them. They began to retreat, glancing at one another, uncertainty clouding their earlier confidence. Sarah shouted again, her voice echoing through the chaos. With a flash of panic, the leader made a split-second decision. The withdrawal of one masked man turned into a hasty retreat as he stumbled back towards the kitchen's sole exit. The unexpected shift spurred the others to follow, a chaotic scramble as they rushed for the door. In a moment of sheer instinct, John hurled the skillet at them, not aiming to injure, but to send a message this family had a right to defend its sanctuary. The skillet missed, clattering harmlessly to the side, but it served its purpose. They were doing whatever it took to reclaim their peace. With their escape now imminent, the last masked man hesitated behind his companions, calculating the risk of re-engagement against his desire to flee. But the energy in the room had shifted. They were no longer the hunters, but the hunted. One of them shouted, urging the others to flee. The shadow of the farmhouse loomed behind John and Sarah, strong and indomitable. As the three intruders stumbled out the front door, retreating into the night, the tension hanging in the air began to dissipate. The sound of their hurried footsteps grew faint as adrenaline coursed through the Thompsons. For a moment, silence enveloped the farmhouse, the kind that follows a storm. Heartbeats echoed through the room, the heavy weight of fear giving way to relief. "I'm so scared," Mia whispered, broken and small. Sarah rushed to her children, gathered them in her arms, heart breaking for their innocence lost. "It's okay, sweetie, we're safe now." John pulled them close too, forming a protective shield around them. "We stood up and we'll keep standing up for each other," he promised, his voice trembling as he fought to mask his own lingering fear. As they gathered themselves, the reality of what had just occurred sank in. Helplessness had been a fleeting visitor, swiftly replaced by pride and strength. The Thompsons had faced an unexpected threat, stood together, and reclaimed their space. Minutes ticked by as the family huddled together, the fear in Mia and Jake's eyes slowly morphing into understanding. They had witnessed resilience in the face of adversity, a reminder of the power that exists within a cohesive unit. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped back, brushing away tears. "We need to call the police," she said, the urgency returning to her voice as the gravity of the experience settled in. "We will," John assured, searching the room for his phone. Yet beneath the hum of anxiety, they knew they had already done something profound. They had fought back, pushing against the fear that sought to claim them. The call to the authorities reported the incident in raw, trembling words. Minutes felt like hours as they reassured the children, murmuring how brave they had been, creating a fort of familial connection against the night's terrors. When the police arrived, lights flashing in a brilliant display that painted the scene in stark contrasts, they knew the real story would unfold not just in the aftermath, but in the lessons woven into their lives that night. Despite the circumstances, there was a liberating truth that shone through the darkness. They could face whatever came their way. The family's bond emerged stronger, shimmering beneath the weight of fear and anxiety. The weeks that followed the attempt at robbery saw the Thompsons coming together, reinforcing their sense of security. They built a more secure farm, installed cameras, but their resolve stood as their shield. They shared their story with neighbors, creating a network of solidarity. Psychologically, moments like these can fracture families, leaving deep scars. But in their case, instead of dividing, it brought them closer, unearthing hidden reserves of strength they hadn't known they possessed. They learned to value their unity, their fights, their love, and the very essence of home. On clear nights, as the stars shone brightly overhead, they would gather on the porch and take solace in the quiet of the farm. With the rustling of the trees as their backdrop, they shared stories of bravery, their own, the stories of farmers who had fought back over the years, each tale reinforcing their resilience. In that little farmhouse amid the rolling fields, they forged a legacy of strength and defiance against fear. They had faced masked thieves and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose, found in each other, fortified with laughter, love, and defiantly unwavering spirits. The doubt, the fear, it was all part of what made them a family. And as they settled into their routine day by day, they were no longer just a household. They had become warriors for their future, standing firm, standing resolute, fiercely guarding what their hearts had built. They were a testament to the undying spirit that would always rise to face the darkness, because every home deserves defenders and every family is worth fighting for. The night was deep, thick with stillness, a blanket of darkness draping the Thompson farm. The moon cast an eerie glow over the fields, illuminating the rows of corn swaying gently in the cool breeze. Somewhere, an owl hooted, its call echoing in the vast emptiness. But inside the cozy farmhouse, there was warmth and laughter, the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals wafting through the air as Sarah Thompson prepped for bed. In the living room, Sarah's husband, John, wrestled with their two kids, Mia and Jake, playfully trying to sneak away for dessert. The atmosphere was light, filled with giggles and playful banter, unaware of the dark figures gathering just beyond their fence. As they chattered and chuckled, the peace was abruptly broken by the grating sound of tires crunching on gravel. At first, it barely registered, just a car passing by. But as the engine's growl gained intensity, dread slithered through the air. Something felt off, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. John asked suddenly, his playful demeanor evaporating, replaced by a sense of wariness. Sarah paused, glancing toward the window, her heart racing at the sight of a pickup truck pulling up to the gates. In that split second, fear slid into their home like a thief in the night. The truck's headlights flickered, and three masked figures climbed out, cloaked in darkness, their movements quick and deliberate. They were a stark contrast against the tranquil backdrop of the Thompson farm, and an icy realization gripped Sarah's heart. "John, something's not right. We need to," she started, but it was too late. Just then, the front door burst open, crashing against the wall with a force that echoed through the house. The leader shouted, brandishing a knife that glinted menacingly under the faint light. Fear pierced the air, thick and suffocating. John instinctively shielded Sarah and the kids, his body trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and protective instinct. "Who are you?" John demanded, his voice tough, yet trembling. "Shut up." The leader's voice dripped with frustration and bravado, but behind his mask, fear flickered like a candle ready to extinguish. Mia and Jake watched wide-eyed, clinging to their parents, rooted in a mix of confusion and terror. Sarah felt her heart drop. She yelled, trying to keep her voice steady. She turned her gaze back at the intruders. "You don't have to do this. Valuables now." The second intruder stepped forward, eyes gleaming with a twisted mix of excitement and desperation. John, staring at the glint of the knife, summoned every ounce of courage he had. "You won't lay a hand on my family," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. He took a step forward, positioning himself between the intruders and his children, determination hardening his resolve. Inside, Sarah felt panic swelling, but alongside it grew an urge to fight back, to protect her home. She glanced around the kitchen, searching for anything, a weapon, a tool, something that could tip the scales. Her gaze landed on the heavy cast-iron skillet resting on the stove. "It's all just stuff," Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging as she reached for the skillet, heart hammering in her chest. Mia sobbed, terrified, but Sarah had already crossed into a realm of defiance that pushed fear aside. With a swift motion, she swung the skillet toward the nearest intruder, connecting with a loud clang. The man stumbled back, shock evident in his eyes, the knife slipping from his grip. That single act of defiance turned the tide. Sarah yelled, empowerment washing over her like a wave. John shouted to the kids as the intruders momentarily reeled in confusion. Jake looked up at his father wide-eyed, the gravity of danger dawning upon him. John urged, and Mia took her brother's hand, pulling him toward the back door as their parents stood firm against the intruders. What the hell was that? The leader shrieked, rage mixing with fear. The air crackled with tension as the Thompsons faced down the intruders, defiance pouring out of each family member. "You need to leave," John said, voice unwavering. The third intruder, wide-eyed and panicked, glanced at his companions. "Forget the plan," the leader barked, lunging toward John. In the chaos, Sarah swung the skillet again, her heart racing with every movement. It was a desperate but determined act that spoke not only of fear but of motherly protection. The leader dodged but stumbled, the confusion among the thieves escalating. One of them yelled, his voice wavering. Sarah shouted, her voice echoing with conviction. In the spectrum of threats, the masked thieves had never anticipated facing such fierce resistance from an ordinary family. The dynamics began to shift. The heart knows no bounds, and families rarely back down when fighting for what they love. "Get out now," John echoed, his resolve imbued with the strength of generations that had worked the land before him. John's voice carried an authority amid the chaos. The intruders looked at each other, hesitation weaving its way through their bravado. One of them shouted. Seizing the moment, the leader backed toward the door, but not before Sarah swung the skillet one last time, just enough to make her point clear. It struck the wall next to him with a loud bang, sending a shudder through the room. She yelled again with adrenaline fueling her every word. The three masked men scrambled toward the door, their earlier bravado evaporating. They had come expecting an easy score, not a family willing to fight for their home. With a final surge of energy, John shouted, "You'll regret ever coming here." And just like that, the dark figures dashed out into the night, leaping into the truck that had been their source of courage just moments ago. In the aftermath, everything settled into a bone-deep silence. No one spoke for a moment as the grip of fear released. The realization of what had just unfolded sank in like heavy stones falling to the ground. Sarah asked, her voice trembling, rushing towards Mia and Jake, who nodded, wide-eyed, still clutching each other tightly. John sank onto a kitchen stool, finally letting out a shaky breath, his heart racing as he took in the scene. "That was incredible," he said, looking at Sarah, astonishment mixing with gratitude. Jake asked, trembling, his voice small. "Yes, they're gone, sweetheart," Sarah assured him, sitting down on the floor with her children. The enormity of the moment washed over them, mingling fear with a burgeoning sense of pride. They had faced a life-threatening situation, and together they had stood their ground. They were merely farmers, but that night they became something bigger. As sirens approached, casting red and blue lights against their walls, a sense of clarity began to replace shock. Families, filled with love and determination, can rise to extraordinary heights when pushed to the edge. When the police entered, they were met with a scene of resilience painted across the startled faces of the Thompson family. They shared their story, hands trembling yet voices steady, recounting the moment one would typically associate with horror, turning it into a narrative of defiance. The officers offered support and reassurance, reminding them they were fortunate. Many families wouldn't have fought back, but here in this small home, they learned that threats sometimes brought out the best in people, illuminating the strength buried deep within. In the weeks that followed, the Thompsons changed in small but significant ways. The experience forged a stronger bond among them. They built a community around their story, sharing it with neighbors and friends. It was a call to vigilance, but also a celebration of the power that lay within unity. On clear nights, the family would gather on the porch, allowing the stars to weave light into the dark. They shared stories and strategies of courage, infusing hope into their conversations. And while the shadows of that night still lingered, they were no longer clutching at fear. They were holding on to resilience. In a world increasingly dominated by shadows, they decided to shine a light on the lessons learned. They discovered that families are built on strength, love, and buoyancy, and that fear could either shackle or elevate them. It was their choice. They understood their fight wasn't just theirs alone. It was a story shared by many who had faced similar challenges, a collective legacy of defiance in the face of darkness. As the harvest came in, the fields danced under the setting sun, offering reminders of the beauty that stemmed from hard work and unity. The moment they faced masked thieves didn't define them, it empowered them. The farmhouse stood firmer, a testament to the power of family and the defiance that comes from standing together. And so, as seasons changed, stories were carved into the landscape, memories meeting the sunrises and sunsets that formed the very fabric of their lives on the Thompson farm. They learned that they would always be defenders of their own, never shrinking before the shadows, because family, after all, was worth fighting for. The night was thick with silence, stretching over the Thompson farm like a heavy blanket. Only the rustling leaves whispered secrets, a soft serenade to the stars shining above. In the cozy kitchen, the last rays of twilight melted into the warm glow of a single lamp, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Sarah Thompson stood by the sink, rinsing out the last dish from dinner, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing outside. Meanwhile, across the fields, a dark figure crept through the shadows, a figure wrapped in dark fabric, face hidden by a mask, eyes fixed on the farmhouse. He was not alone. Two more lurked close behind, hearts beating with a mix of nerve and greed as they readied themselves for what they believed would be an easy heist. They had watched the Thompsons for days, seeing only the typical hustle and bustle of a hardworking family on a remote farm. But they didn't know what this family was capable of when cornered. As Sarah finished up, she heard the faint rumble of tires on gravel. She paused, wiping her hands, a nagging feeling creeping into her mind. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to drop by, but the chill in her spine warned her that something felt off. Moments later, the front door slammed open, sending a jolt of fear rocketing through her body. The three masked men barged in, their presence an abrupt eruption of chaos into the peaceful home. "Get down!" The largest one shouted, the words laced with urgency and authority. Instinctively, Sarah stepped in front of her two children, Mia and Jake, who stood frozen in their tracks, eyes wide with confusion and terror. John Thompson, her husband, came rushing into the room, fully aware that their lives were about to change in an instant. John demanded, voice steady, but adrenaline coursed through his veins as he assessed the situation. His protective instincts kicked in like a well-oiled machine. "Just the cash," the leader growled, revealing a knife that glinting in the dim light. "And we'll be gone before you know it." But John's heart was galloping. Any threat against his family sparked a primal fire deep inside him. He shouted back, voice rising with defiance. At that moment, he wasn't just a farmer. He was a man willing to fight for everything he loved. In the corner of the kitchen, Mia gripped her little brother's hand tightly, her face pale, barely comprehending the danger. "Mom, I'm scared," she whispered. Sarah turned to her children, her face a mask of determination. "Stay behind me, and whatever happens, don't be afraid," she said, hoping to reassure them. The tension in the room was electric, filling every corner with palpable fear. The intruders weren't just thieves. They were desperate, their eyes glinting with hunger for easy prey. The leader lunged forward, aiming the knife at John, but he sidestepped, adrenaline surging through him. "Leave us alone!" John yelled, feeling the raw energy of survival connecting him to the land they had toiled over for years. His defiance sparked a flicker of fear in the thieves' eyes, a realization that they might have underestimated the Thompsons. Sarah knew they had to act fast. She turned, scanning the kitchen for anything that could help. Her eyes landed on the heavy cast-iron skillet resting on the counter. Without thinking, she rushed to grab it, feeling the weight of the tool in her hand. Mia cried, fear spilling out of her as she watched her mother prepare for battle. But Sarah's mind was made up. She shouted, swinging the skillet with all her might toward the closest intruder. The metal connected with his shoulder, sending him stumbling backward, shock and pain etched into his features. The room erupted into chaos, sounds of clattering dishes and shouts blending into a cacophony of survival and despair. John seized the moment, pushing the leader away and sending him rolling toward the floor. He shouted to Mia and Jake. Jake replied, small yet resolute. Sarah urged, her heart racing as she stood ready to protect her family at all costs. As the kitchen transformed into a battleground, the two remaining intruders exchanged desperate glances, caught off guard by this fierce resistance. One whispered, disbelief coloring his voice. Sarah felt a surge of courage coursing through her. The fear that had once paralyzed her began to morph into a fiery resolve. She shouted, gripping the skillet like a lifeline as she steeled her gaze on the intruders. The leader recovered quickly, scrambling back to his feet, knife at the ready. He yelled, but there was a tremor in his voice, a crack in their wall of confidence. John responded, his posture solid, determination blazing in his eyes. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Sarah, a united front against their attackers. In that moment, the intruders realized they were not just up against a frightened family, but a fierce unit willing to defend their home and their lives. The tide was shifting, and the power dynamic began to unravel. One of the thieves shouted, his bravado crumbling as they stepped backward, inching toward the door. The sight sparked a flame of hope within Sarah's chest. "You think you can just waltz in here and demand what's ours?" She yelled, her voice ringing out with the confidence of a mother lion protecting her cubs. As the lead thief turned to make a break for it, Sarah swung the skillet once more, this time narrowly missing him as he bounded toward freedom. The sound echoed ominously, a final warning, a testament to the collective power of a family fighting back. The three intruders stumbled through the front door, crashing into each other as they fumbled their escape. Fear clouded their minds, scrambling their senses, turning them from thieves into terrified children. John and Sarah stood resolute in the entrance, ready for one last front against the intruders, hearts pounding, minds focused. But just as the thieves hit the porch, the family dog, Max, sensing the disturbance, erupted into a fiery bark, charging toward them with his fierce loyalty and excitement. The sound sent the intruders tumbling back, scrambling into their vehicle with a frantic energy that indicated they had underestimated the Thompson family. The leader shouted, and without a second thought, they piled into the truck, sped off with squealing tires kicking up gravel, leaving the night echoing with the remnants of their chaos. As silence returned, the family stood frozen, breaths coming in sharp bursts. Sarah dropped the skillet, her hands trembling, tears of adrenaline and relief welling in her eyes. She asked, voice quavering. Jake and Mia rushed into her arms, clinging tightly, while John wrapped his arms around all of them. "We're okay," he murmured, his own heart still racing, swelling with an odd mixture of pride and disbelief. As the sound of distant sirens approached, the reality of what had just unfolded settled over them like early morning fog. They had faced down intruders with nothing but their will to protect each other. The police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating a chaotic scene. They listened carefully as the Thompsons shared their experience, the officers offering support and making notes, but the family could see the reporters' reactions. The story was far larger than a mere robbery. It was about the defiance of a family standing together against fear. The following weeks were filled with conversations and shared stories, building strength from their experience. They became advocates for security on the farm, creating a strong community with their neighbors, adding extra lighting and forming a neighborhood watch. The sense of shared vulnerability connected them in ways that hadn't existed before. Through this, they found solace in togetherness. As they worked together in the fields, they shared the echoes of laughter, weaving bravery into their daily lives, integrating lessons learned from that harrowing night. While the ordinary rhythms of farm life resumed, everything felt renewed. The sip of cool water on the porch, the rippling laughter of children chasing across the grass, the comforting smell of home-cooked meals wafting from the kitchen. They understood that the roots of resilience had grown deeper within their family, each member forging an unspoken pact of protection and strength. Gradually, the nightmare of that night faded into the backdrop of their lives, transformed into a tale of courage and defiance, one that Mia and Jake would carry with them for years. They would tell tales of bravery to their friends, not in whispers of fear, but in lively recounts of the day their parents fought back. Years later, as they gathered on the porch under the expansive sky, the sun setting in hues of orange and pink, they shared stories of bravery, lessons, and love. Each tale drew them closer, wrapping them in a blanket of memories forged in strength. Embracing that pivotal moment, the night they faced masked intruders together, they knew they were forged anew, each heart beating gently in rhythm with the other. After all, it wasn't the uniformity of life that mattered, but rather how they faced its challenges, side by side, always ready to rise when shadows dared to threaten their world. And so, they lived out their days, champions of their own story, standing together against whatever darkness came, not just as a family, but as a fierce unit of love and defiance that would never back down. Because they had fought for their home, and in doing so, they had become so much more than just a family. They had become a beacon of strength for others, glowing brightly against the backdrop of the night. The stillness of the night was shattered by the deep growl of an engine roaring down the gravel road. At the Henderson farm, the moon hung low in the sky, illuminating the fields of corn that swayed gently in the cool evening breeze. Inside, laughter echoed through the cozy farmhouse as the Henderson family settled down for the night after a long day of work. Little did they know, danger was lurking just beyond their gate. As the headlights of the approaching truck pierced through the darkness, a sense of foreboding crept in. The three masked figures inside exchanged glances, their hearts racing with a mix of excitement and fear. They had been scoping this farm for days, convinced that it would be an easy target. After all, how much trouble could a family of farmers pose, especially in the dead of night? The truck came to a sudden stop, and the three figures climbed out, their faces hidden behind dark masks. The leader, a tall man with a gravelly voice, wore an air of bravado as they approached the house. "Stick to the plan," he whispered, trying to steady his nerves. Inside, 12-year-old Lily Henderson had just finished cleaning up after dinner. She turned off the lights in the kitchen, tossing a glance out the window. She caught a glimpse of the strange truck and squinted, sensing something was off. Her heart raced as she turned to call for her parents. "Mom," she shouted, but her voice barely penetrated the walls of the cozy home. The intruders, stealthy and quick, crept toward the front door. With calculated precision, the leader kicked the door open, splintering the wood with a loud crash. "Get down," he bellowed, knife glinting in the dim light. Panic erupted in the air as Lily's parents, Tom and Sarah, rushed into the living room. Tom demanded, instinctively stepping in front of Lily, a protective guard ready to defend his family. The leader shouted, the adrenaline coursing through him as he scanned the room, sizing up his unsuspecting prey. Sarah's heart raced as she pulled Lily closer. She caught Tom's eye over their daughter's head, a wordless agreement passed between them. This was their home, they weren't going down without a fight. Tom yelled, voice strong and defiant, "You picked the wrong house." The towering figure of the leader faltered, momentarily thrown off balance by Tom's fierce assertion. The other two masked men hesitated, glancing nervously at their leader. Inner conflict danced across their faces, part intimidation, part fear. They had come expecting an easy score, not this unexpected resistance. In a flash, with instinct taking over, Sarah's gaze darted around the room. She spotted a heavy wooden stool in the corner, sturdy and solid, a symbol of the hard work that built their lives. Before she had time to think, she lunged for it. Lily shouted, but her mother was already moving. With one swift motion, Sarah swung the stool at the leader, striking him in the side. He gasped, momentarily stunned. The weapon, though primitive, symbolized a fierce protective instinct that had risen within her, a mother unwilling to let fear dictate their fate. Tom seized his moment. He shoved the second masked man away, sending him stumbling back. He yelled, feeling a rush of adrenaline that pushed him beyond fear. The scuffle erupted into chaos. The living room, once a sanctuary, became a battleground. Lily watched, frightened but awed, as her parents fought back against the intruders who sought to invade their home. Sarah shouted, her voice full of fire. The masked men were not prepared for this level of defiance. They had thought the Hendersons would cower, that they would roll over and hand over everything without protest. The leader yelled at his accomplices, grabbed them. But there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes as he glanced around, feeling the energy of resistance. For a moment, time slowed. Everyone in the room was keenly aware of the stakes. Fear collided with determination, and the air crackled with intensity. This wasn't just about valuables. It was a fight for their lives, for their home. As the fight continued, the masked intruder lunged for Lily, trying to grab her. Instinctively, she grabbed a nearby lamp, swinging it wildly in his direction. The lamp connected with a loud crash, sending glass flying. She yelled, her young voice ringing with sheer panic. That small act of bravery shifted everything. The leader, seeing the fierce spirit of the family, felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. "This is going south fast," he shouted, panic creeping into his tone. Just then Tom lunged forward, grabbing the leader's wrist, twisting it hard to disarm him. The knife clattered to the ground. He shouted, pushing the intruder away. The two other masked men stumbled back, their confidence quickly fading. The dog, Max, sensing the chaos, began barking wildly from the other room, adding to the cacophony. In that moment, fear overtook the intruders, and their bravado shattered like the lamp's remnants across the floor. The leader yelled in desperation, looking at his partners, who were shaking their heads, terrified of the ferocity unleashed by the Henderson family. Before the intruders could react, the three of them bolted out the front door, nearly tumbling over each other in their haste to escape. One shouted as they scrambled toward their vehicle parked hastily on the gravel driveway, jumping inside before the engine was even turned on. In the aftermath, the Henderson family stood amidst the chaos, breaths coming in rapid bursts. The silence following the pandemonium felt surreal, almost dreamlike. They had faced down masked thieves armed with a knife and stolen bravado, but they had fought back with courage, heart, and unity. Tom asked, kneeling down to gather Lily and Sarah in his arms, relief flooding through him. "I'm okay, Dad," she whispered, though her small body trembled with fear. It hadn't been a fairy tale night. It had been a battle for their home, but they had fought for each other. As the adrenaline ebbed, they began to assess the destruction around them. The broken lamp, the scattered chairs, and the damaged door. But beneath it all, they felt something far more powerful, a renewed sense of strength, of familial bonds that had deepened in the face of terror. Moments later, the police arrived, lights flashing against the walls of their home. Officers stepped inside, assessing the situation, their faces a mixture of concern and determination. One of the officers, a woman with a gentle voice, asked as she approached the family. They shared their harrowing tale, recounting the chaos that had unfolded, the masked men, the struggle, and ultimately their fierce resistance. The officer nodded firmly. "You acted bravely. Not many families would stand their ground like that against intruders. You're fortunate," she said, a note of admiration in her voice. As the officers gathered evidence, the sense of camaraderie and strength began to weave its way through the family. They had faced darkness together and emerged stronger. Days turned into weeks, and slowly life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The family focused on healing, reinforcing their home but also their spirits. They shared the story with neighbors, creating a network of support, reassurance, and vigilance. Tom and Sarah often reflected on that night, discussing how their decisions had shaped not just the present but their future. They spoke to their children about bravery, about standing up for oneself, and the importance of family. Those lessons became the fabric that held them together. Around the dinner table, laughter returned, the stories of that harrowing night morphing into tales of resilience rather than fear. They became the resurgence of hope, each family member empowered by their shared experience. Together, they fortified their home with lights, cameras, and a newfound awareness of safety. But more importantly, they built an emotional fortress, a bond that could withstand any storm. As they worked side by side, planting seeds and tilling the earth that had given them so much, they shared glances of understanding. Each day became a testament to their strength, a celebration of life, love, and the unyielding spirit that coursed through them. In the evenings, they would gather on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The fields whispered their secrets, dancing in the wind, a constant reminder of the beauty that lives even in the face of adversity. They knew that though shadows might loom together, they were a force to be reckoned with. When the stars filled the sky, Sarah would often recount the story again, not as a tale of fear, but as a testament to resilience. "We stood together that night, and we will always stand together," she'd say, her voice laced with love. And so the Hendersons carved their lives into their beloved farm, growing not just crops but a legacy of courage. They understood that family meant fighting together in adversity, and together they would always face whatever threats came knocking, because they had each other, and that was their greatest weapon of all. From that night forward, the philosophy they lived by was simple yet profound. There is no darkness that can extinguish the light of unity, and nothing can break the bond forged in love, defiance, and an unyielding will to protect what truly matters. Every sunrise became a reminder of their victories and the unwavering strength that defined them as a family stronger than any masked thief could ever imagine. A flicker of headlights pierced the inky darkness of the night, the shadowy figure of a pickup truck creeping down the gravel road leading to the Thompson farm. It was a serene evening, the kind where crickets serenaded the world, and not a soul could be seen for miles. But that peace was about to be shattered. Inside the farmhouse, the Thompson family finished dinner, laughter echoing as they shared stories after a long day of hard work. Suddenly, the laughter was interrupted by the unmistakable rumble of an unfamiliar truck pulling up to their gate. Sarah Thompson, wiping her hands on a dish towel, glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Who could be visiting at this hour? She asked, glancing toward her husband, Tom. He shrugged, his brow furrowing slightly as he walked over to the window. "Probably just a neighbor," he said, but the unease in his voice betrayed his casual words. Then the sound of a door slammed shut broke the stillness outside. Sarah's heart raced as she exchanged worried glances with Tom. And then, without warning, the front door blasted open with a violent shove. 3 masked men burst into the room. "Get down," the leader shouted, brandishing a knife that glinted ominously in the dim light of the kitchen. Panic surged through Sarah's chest, but instinct kicked in. She shouted, stepping in front of her 8-year-old son, Jake, and 10-year-old Mia, shielding them with her body. The leader barked, eyes darting around the room, sizing up resistance. Tom instinctively pushed forward, a protective barrier between his family and the intruders. "You can't take anything from us." The 3 thieves, cloaked in their dark clothing, seemed surprised by the defiance that emanated from this seemingly peaceful family. "Just give us the cash and this will all be over," one of the other masked men said, his voice shaky. But fear morphed into anger, and Sarah felt a fire ignite inside her. "You think you can just storm in here and take what's ours?" Before anyone knew what had happened, Sarah snatched a heavy cast-iron skillet from the counter. She yelled, swinging it with fierce determination. The skillet connected with the leader's shoulder, the impact sending shockwaves through the room. The masked man cried out in pain, stumbling backward, the knife slipping from his grasp. Tom seized the moment, driving forward to tackle the closest intruder, a battle cry escaping his lips. Mia shouted, her voice piercing in the chaos, but Sarah was focused, adrenaline pumping through her veins. John struggled with the intruder he had tackled, grappling with him on the floor. The other masked men hesitated, their confidence crumbling against the sheer resolve of this family. The leader snapped, panic spilling into his words as he regained his footing and charged at Sarah. In a moment that felt like an eternity, Sarah had no time for fear. She swung the skillet again, but this time he ducked, barely avoiding the blow. The force of her swing sent her staggering, but she steadied herself, ready to defend her family at all costs. Jake screamed as the last masked man lunged for Sarah, desperation etched across his face. With every ounce of courage, Sarah turned just in time. Instead of retreating, she pushed forward, swinging the skillet again. This time, it struck the masked man squarely on the leg, sending him crashing down with a yelp of pain. Tom managed to wrestle the leader to the ground, the floorboard creaking under their weight. "You picked the wrong house, buddy," he growled, his voice low and menacing. In the backdrop, chaos reigned as Lily scrambled to find her footing. The dog, Max, yelped, sensing the flurry of movement and danger lurking in the air. The leader yelled, struggling to break free from Tom's grip, his bravado slipping away. Sarah glanced back at her children. "Go to the neighbors," she commanded, her tone sharp, eyes fierce even in the chaos. "No," Mia cried, clinging to Jake, fear sweeping across their young faces. Tom shouted, determination flooding his voice as he pinned the intruder down, his heart racing to protect his family. As they reached the door, Mia hesitated, looking back at her parents. She cried, but Sarah met her gaze, her expression firm yet filled with love. "You have to trust us, sweetheart." With that, Mia grasped Jake's hand, and they darted through the back door, racing towards the neighbor's house, their little hearts pounding. The moment the children were out of sight, Sarah felt a twisted sense of relief mixed with dread. She could not let her little one see fear. The leader barked, forcing himself free from Tom's grip. He pushed himself up, and as the chaos escalated, Tom locked eyes with Sarah, a silent confirmation passing between them. Together, they pressed forward, facing the armed intruders with unwavering courage. But the masked men, now desperate and cornered, stumbled toward the exit, the tide turning against them. "Let's go," one shouted, backing away, panic rising in their voices. Sarah challenged, gripping the skillet tightly, the weight of the tool feeling like a weapon of resilience in her hands. The leader hesitated, caught between flight and fear. He glanced at the door, contemplating escape, but his pride and desperation battled within him, chaos swirling as he calculated his next move. Just then, Max burst into the room, barking furiously, the loyal dog sensing the danger and charging at the intruders. Sarah felt a rush of pride as he lunged toward them, his ferocity adding to their defense. "Forget it," the leader yelled, rushing out into the cool night air. In confrontation, the balance had shifted, disbelief now reflected in their eyes. As they fled the house, they stumbled over each other, scrambling to get into their truck, fear and desperation swirling in their expressions. The sound of the tires screeched as they took off, stirring up a cloud of dust that mingled with the night air. As the dust settled, silence enveloped the farmhouse. Tom released a shaky breath, collapsing against the wall, heart racing. "We did it. They're gone," he gasped, disbelief etched on his face as the adrenaline began to fade. Sarah dropped the skillet, her hands trembling as she rushed to the living room window, peering out into the darkness. "Yes, I think so," Tom replied, coming up beside her, still catching his breath. But as they looked at each other, relief flooded through them, quickly followed by the crushing weight of the moment. The house was a war zone, chairs overturned, decorations shattered, memories splintered in the chaos. But most importantly, their children were safe. Yet just as the panic began to subside, an eerie calm settled over the farm. In the distance, a sound stirred, a low growl of an engine returning, creeping back through the thick night. Sarah whispered, dread creeping back into her chest. Tom squinted toward the sound, swallowing hard. Suddenly, the night sky erupted with the sound of a car accelerating, the headlights returning, brighter than before. Adrenaline surged through them again as they leaped back from the window, their safe haven now a potential target once more. "Lily!" Sarah shouted, rushing toward the back door, ready to retreat. But dread hung heavy in the air as they realized their children might still be outside. Panic took over. "No." Tom exclaimed, pushing himself to the door, building a wall that deterred intruders and protected family. But as the truck rolled to a stop, the headlights blaring through the window, they could see the shadows of the three masked figures climbing out again, faces tense with desperation. Tom yelled, bolting toward the door to lock it tight. They needed to act fast, their hearts racing, seconds ticking away. In a moment of sheer instinct, Sarah sprang into action. She grabbed an old wooden chair and readied herself, preparing for another fight. The intruders had underestimated this family, and they would face the consequences of their actions tonight. With each heartbeat echoing in the silence, the door creaked open, revealing the masked figures who had returned, fueled by a different kind of rage-revenge. One of them shouted, his voice a raw growl. The air thickened with expectation, tension snapping like a taut wire. Tom insisted, fire igniting in his chest as he faced down the intruders once more, determination carved into every line of his face. Then, as the figures stepped forward into the house, chaos erupted once more in a battle of wills. The masked men charged forth, their shadows stretching long, the stakes higher than ever. They were coming back for what they believed was rightfully theirs, but what they didn't know was that true strength lies in the heart of a family ready to defend its own. Sarah and Tom stood at the threshold, ready to protect their home, their hearts pounding in rhythm with a single, unwavering thought. This time they wouldn't back down. And as the clash began anew, the night would bear witness to the unparalleled spirit of the Thompson family, a raw, unyielding force of love and defiance ignited by fear, ready to face their fate, no matter the outcome. But would they be enough? The battle for their home was just beginning, and the line between safety and chaos grew thinner with every breath.